Awesome. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Let me start with the introduction. Online media has wiped out newspaper subscription in recent years, and newspaper companies are struggling to adapt to this market. Local newspapers are trying to switch to subscription-based models that function on personalization and user engagement. Studies have shown the internet has become a major source of news due to its constant availability, and about 9 in 10 adults in the US read news online. However, an essential issue in the online media domain is the lack of definition of the criteria for newsworthiness. So, creating a recommender system on a digital app is one way local newspapers can increase their customer advocacy. The goal of the recommender system is to improve user experience and user engagement by prompting appropriate news articles to news readers. Personalized news applications tend to prioritize news items based on topics and global user preferences across all news categories and geographical locations, as well as based on the popularity and recency of news items. However, the focus on long-term, high-level preferences may in fact result in taking away attention from local stories that help provide the distinguishing added value for local newspapers. For example, a local newsreader may not generally be a sports fan, so the sports-related features may not play a major role in generating personalized content for that user. However, the user, like many other local readers, might have an intense interest in the local high school team. We have two main research questions in our research. First, how do localized recommendation models perform in regards to system accuracy compared to standard models that focus on users' global preferences for news? And the second one, what is the effect of leveraging different local news categories on the overall quality of news recommendations? We hypothesized that considering the context on the item side, which in this case is locality, would increase news recommender system accuracy for certain categories of local news. Our approach involves considering local preferences in creating session-based news recommendation models that hopefully this translates to increased user engagement. And we collected and processed data from a local news source. We designed our experiment based on data to compare the localized model with the standard models and identify the effects of different new news categories on overall recommendations. The data that we use in this research is for 4 months from a Syracuse newspaper, is a local newspaper in Syracuse, New York. And we organized this data using 2 categories of tags, one based on the article's main types and one based on the URL information. And the main categories that we use were news, sports, and life and cultures. And we extract some subcategories based on the URL that we use. So the detail of the data set could be found in our paper. This is an example. We can see that from Syracuse.com. Here we have a local article and main category news, subcategory crime. These are the main categories: news, so sports, and life and culture that I mentioned. These are subcategories, and this is an example of non-local article or global article. The main category is news, and subcategory is US news. We applied association rules, first order Markov chain, sequential rules, and session-based KNN. For our experiments, we didn't use hybrid approach because The only content information we had from articles was the headline and URL, and we had minimal contextual information surrounding the users, and only looking at their location and timestamps. And deep learning approach needs a larger data set, so we neglect to report the results of that approach. And we use these simple baseline methods because they have mostly outperformed the more complicated approaches. Using our local news data set, we experimented with different session-based recommendation methods in 3 different scenarios to explore the effectiveness of the localized models in a news, like a recommendation system. In the first scenario, all articles, both local and non-local, were used in training and in testing phase. In second scenario, only local articles were used to learn localized models, and also for tests, we just use local news data. And in third scenario, models were learned based on all data, but were only tested on test data that is from local news articles. In the initial experiment, we compared the performance of our baseline session-based recommender systems in the 3 scenarios that I mentioned. We addressed the research question 1, that we wanted to see how much more effective the recommendations would be when the algorithm focused on local news. We compared the local and general models using different algorithms to show that the results were not algorithm specific. And the results show that in general, recommendation models that are trained on local news articles tend to be more accurate when recommending local articles than recommenders that were trained on both local and non-local articles. Also, looking at the results across different recommendation algorithms, SKNN perform better, so we use that in our next experiments. To address the second research questions, we designed experiments to find the impact of hyper-local models, where models were trained and tested on specific news categories. And so in this experiment, we implemented 9 different scenarios to find how effective our training models on all versus training on local articles in different news categories. And we found that when recommending local articles, training on local articles yielded better personalization than training with all articles. This effect was observed across all the scenarios involving local news categories. We also observe a difference in the degree of improvement in recommendation effectiveness across categories. For example, there is a greater advantage in using localized models for the local news categories than there is for the other 2 categories. In fact, it may be possible that the more general models trained on all news articles perform better than localized models in case of some news categories. The localization effect is even more evident when more granular categorization of local news articles is used. In order to find specific characteristics of users' local preferences, we decided to explore the main categories by breaking them down into subcategories. We use hit rate at 20 for the metric, and it shows significant variance across different subcategories depending on training set, which is local versus global. For example, in the subcategory of news politics, we can see that higher performance when the model is trained on all articles. This is an example of a situation where localized models would be less effective than global models. In this case, the effect is likely due to the fact that among local readers, their news preferences related to politics center more around non-local and national issues. So in this work, we proposed using localized models in session-based recommender system when recommending local news items where there is an intense local interest and there is a significant difference between users' global and local news preferences. And these findings can inform the design of more effective local news recommender system that distinguish between certain categories of local and general news. We conducted multiple experiments offline experiments on local news data set and showed that in some specific news categories, they perform better, localized models perform better comparing to models based on general news preferences. Thank you.